Hello, everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a situation that is rapidly escalating and drawing global attention. Military tensions in Belarus are rising once again, and the developments unfolding behind closed doors are raising serious questions about what could happen next. Belarus has always been a tightly controlled state, but the latest reports show that cracks are forming within the system. Officers, commanders, and even mid-level units appear increasingly uneasy, and the growing strain is now too big to ignore. For years, the Belarusian government relied on absolute loyalty from its armed forces. The military structure functioned on discipline, central control, and a strict hierarchy. But recent months have seen significant shifts in the attitudes of soldiers and officers who are frustrated with political interference, economic pressure, and the increasing involvement of Belarusian forces in regional conflicts that many believe do not serve the country's interests. These tensions are not only internal. External pressures are adding fuel to the fire as Belarus becomes more entangled in geopolitical disputes. One major source of tension comes from the deepening relationship between Belarus and Russia. While both governments claim unity and strength, many Belarusian officers privately worry that their military is losing independence. Some believe Belarus is being pulled into decisions that do not align with their national priorities. This suspicion creates quiet frustration within military ranks, especially among older officers who served before the current era of political tightening. They fear that Belarus is becoming a pawn rather than a partner, and their concerns have quietly spread through various branches of the armed forces. Another factor contributing to the rising pressure is the government's demand for greater military readiness. Troops are being pushed into constant drills, extended duty periods, and sudden relocations. Some units report shortages of equipment or outdated gear that has not been replaced for years. These issues create resentment among soldiers who feel increasingly burdened without seeing improvements in support or resources. When morale drops, discipline weakens, and the government knows this better than anyone. That's why the authorities have started tightening internal surveillance within the army, hoping to prevent dissent before it becomes visible. But, ironically, the more control the leadership tries to impose, the more frustration it generates. In many countries, tensions between soldiers and political leaders eventually fade, but in Belarus the situation appears to be growing more severe. Several analysts believe the government's fear of rebellion is actually making the military more rebellious. Officers are beginning to whisper about changes they believe are necessary, though these conversations remain hidden from public view. Still, the fact that such discussions are happening at all marks a major shift in a military that once prided itself on unwavering loyalty. Adding to the instability, Belarus continues facing economic hardships, which directly affect soldiers and their families. Pay raises have been delayed, benefits have been cut, and housing improvements promised years ago have still not been delivered. When soldiers feel their personal lives are insecure, their loyalty becomes fragile. Many soldiers join the military seeking stability, but now even that stability is slipping away. These frustrations appear small individually, but together they create a dangerous environment for internal unrest. The political climate in Belarus is intensifying the tension even further. The government knows it cannot function without the full support of the military, so it frequently pressures army units to demonstrate public loyalty. Soldiers are expected to participate in state-led events, public marches, or official media appearances that present an image of unity. But behind the scenes, some soldiers complain that they are being forced into politics. They believe the military should remain focused on national defense, not political propaganda. This internal conflict between duty and politics is becoming a major point of irritation within the ranks. Some generals, according to several unofficial reports, have started questioning recent decisions made by the leadership. These officers are not openly confrontational, but their reluctance to support certain policies signals a subtle shift. They are pushing for reforms, requesting better transparency, and demanding more independence for military operations. The leadership, however, sees these moves as possible threats, which only increases the tension. Even small disagreements between generals and political authorities can grow into bigger conflicts if mistrust continues to build. The border situation also plays a major role in all of this. Belarus sits in a strategic location, surrounded by NATO countries on one side and Russia on the other. As the region becomes more tense, Belarus is pulled into every conflict, whether it wants to be or not. Border troops are under constant pressure to stay on high alert, and their workload has increased dramatically. This constant state of readiness exhausts the soldiers and increases mistakes, and mistakes in border operations can quickly escalate into international incidents. The stress is building, and leaders are finding it harder to control their forces. Meanwhile, younger soldiers who joined recently are seeing the situation differently than older officers. The new generation is more connected to the outside world through social media, online communities, and independent news outlets. They are more aware of global politics and more skeptical of official government narratives. They see what is happening in neighboring countries and compare it to their own situation. This awareness is creating a quiet but significant change in attitudes within the military. Younger soldiers are less willing to blindly follow orders they disagree with, and this generational divide is becoming another source of instability. Foreign governments are watching the situation very closely. Some countries believe Belarus could be entering a period of unpredictable transformation. If tensions continue to grow, the risk of internal conflict increases. A military that feels cornered or frustrated can react in unexpected ways, especially if it believes the political leadership is no longer acting in the country's best interests. While there is no public sign of rebellion, the internal pressure is building like steam inside a closed system. All it takes is one spark to trigger something larger. The leadership in Belarus is doing everything it can to keep control. They are increasing monitoring of communication, restricting access to sensitive information, and rotating officers between units so no group becomes too united. These methods may temporarily delay unrest, but they also create fear and mistrust among military personnel. When a government constantly rotates commanders, it signals that it does not trust them. When soldiers feel watched, they become even more resentful. These tactics ultimately weaken the military instead of strengthening it. Rumors have also spread about disagreements within the top command structure. Some senior officers reportedly want a more strategic and balanced approach to foreign relations, while others argue that firm alignment with Russia is the only way forward. These internal disagreements reflect the broader struggle happening behind the scenes. When generals disagree on the country's future direction, the military becomes divided, and a divided military is far more likely to experience internal tension. At the same time, Belarus's involvement in regional conflicts continues to create complications. Military advisors, secret deployments, or intelligence cooperation with neighboring states have placed additional pressure on Belarusian forces. Some officers feel they are being used for political objectives rather than national defense. This sense of being dragged into unnecessary conflicts increases resentment within the ranks. Soldiers want clarity, purpose, and leadership that puts their country first, not alliances or political deals. The leadership is also concerned about defections. Several small cases of soldiers escaping Belarus or seeking asylum have been reported in recent years. While these numbers are small, they represent a symbolic challenge. When even a few soldiers choose to abandon their posts, it signals a deeper problem within the military. The government has responded by strengthening border checks for its own troops and increasing internal audits, but once again, these actions create more pressure and fear instead of addressing root causes. Another growing concern is communication between military families. Spouses, parents, and relatives of soldiers talk openly about their struggles, and these conversations often spread frustration. When families lose trust in the government or fear for their loved ones, they put pressure on soldiers to think about their personal well-being rather than blind loyalty. These conversations, happening quietly in homes across the country, may seem insignificant individually, but collectively they influence the mindset of thousands of soldiers. The situation is also affected by Belarus's domestic political climate. The government's tight control over protests, political opposition, and civil society puts the military in an uncomfortable position. Soldiers are sometimes used to support internal security operations, which many believe should not be part of the military's role. When the military is pulled into political tensions at home, it adds stress, confusion, and moral conflict. Soldiers want to defend the country, not police their own citizens. This role conflict increases the feeling of internal pressure. Looking ahead, the rising military tensions in Belarus could lead to several possible outcomes. The government may attempt to strengthen control even further, but this risks pushing the military closer to the breaking point. Alternatively, the leadership might try to introduce limited reforms to calm the situation, though it remains unclear whether they are willing to compromise. Another possibility is that internal disagreements within the military leadership could intensify, leading to fractures or unexpected power shifts. While these scenarios remain speculative, analysts agree that the situation is becoming more fragile with each passing month. Despite these tensions, most soldiers still want stability. They want a future where the military is strong, respected, and independent. They want leadership that listens rather than commands, and they want a system that values their service and supports their families. These desires may seem simple, but achieving them requires major changes in how the government interacts with its military. Until those changes happen, the pressure inside the system will continue to build. In conclusion, Belarus is entering a critical moment. Military tensions are rising, morale is weakening, and trust is eroding. The government is trying to maintain control, but the situation is becoming harder to manage. External pressures, internal disagreements, generational shifts, and economic struggles are all combining to create a complex and potentially dangerous environment. What happens next remains uncertain, but one thing is clear: the stability of Belarus's military and perhaps the country itself is facing one of its greatest tests in decades.